Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia daf Hey. It was great to see many of you at the Shiur last night. If you missed the Shiur, not to worry, you can watch it online. There's already a post with the Shiur with all of it up. So happy watching. Okay, today's daf is sponsored by Abby Flamholtz in honor of her daughter-in-law Sigal. She is a superwoman, an inspirational wife, mother, and Torah Jew. Today's daf is sponsored by Rami and Josh Sussman in honor of their oldest son finishing 3 years and 8 months of service in the IDF this week. We've been in awe of how you carried yourself with grace, confidence, determination, and leadership since the day your service started. Through countless nights in the Shetach and months in Gaza, you've stayed true to yourself. We love you and couldn't possibly be more proud of your service. Okay, with that, we will get started with our daf. So let's remind ourselves of where we were. We had two statements of Rabbi Chiya. The first one we proved from the Mishna, and then we said, wait a minute, that Mishna actually doesn't really provide a proof. It's providing proof, our Mishna, for a different statement of Rabbi Chiya. So the two statements of Rabbi Chiya, the first one was, actually, we'll get back to the first one soon. Let's deal with the second one because we're in the middle of that now. Soon we'll get back to the first one. The second statement of Rabbi Chiya was a case of modeh b'miktzat, where I admit to part of a claim, and then I say, but heilach, here's the part I admit to, and it's yours. Okay, whether I actually physically hand it to you or I just point out, well, this is yours, this money in my wallet, that's your money, or whatever it might be. And then Rabbi Chiya said, even though you might have thought, and that's what Rav Sheshet actually thinks, that once I say heilach, it's as if I've paid it back, which means that the part I'm denying stands on its own, which means it's no longer modeh b'miktzat, and you would take an oath. Well, comes Rabbi Chiya and says you still take an oath on that. It's still viewed as a regular modeh b'miktzat. Rav Sheshet said it is no longer viewed as a modeh b'miktzat, and you wouldn't take an oath on the second half. So we've been in the middle of, which we're going to continue today, difficulties we've been raising on either Rabbi Chiya. First one was against Rabbi Chiya. The next two were against Rav Sheshet. By the way, I just want to point out something strange methodologically here in terms of our sugya. We have Rabbi Chiya, who's a Tana, and arguing over with an Amora, Rav Sheshet. Usually you don't have Tanaim and Amoraim disagreeing. Usually the sugyot are Tanaim disagreeing or Amoraim disagreeing, right? Those are people from different time periods. It's a little bit strange that we have this, but Rabbi Chiya is sort of at the end of the Tanaim time period, so perhaps because of that, but it is a little bit strange, or atypical, I should say. So we were in the middle of this question that Rav Zutra asked against Rav Sheshet. And he brought this Mishna in Shavuot, where it said basically, if you deny, we have an issue of kalim and karka. I'm claiming you owe me both kalim. Let's say we use the example of cars and land. And I admit to the cars, I don't have to take an oath on the land. Or I admit to the land, I don't have to take an oath on the cars. And then we said it's a case of heilach. And then they said, and from there you see that you would think the heilach is obligated. Because the case of kelim and kelim must be kelim and kelim like karka, because otherwise there would be no use to say that in the Mishnah. It would be very obvious. So they basically turned it into a heilach case and say, and look, you're obligated, to which they rejected and say, lo. Okay, we're about 6 lines from the bottom. Lo olam emelcha kelim bekelim nami patur. Really, I'm going to explain the kelim and kelim is also going to be exempt, even in a heilach case, which then would match up to Rav Sheshet, which is what we were trying to do. And the fact that it says kelim and karkaot was really to teach you hakamash v'lan hodeh b'miktzat kelim chayav af ala karkaot, and that the case was a little different than we thought. It wasn't kelim and karka and or kelim and kelim and that's it, right? Actually, we were talking about the kelim and kelim case. It's actually when we say kelim and kelim and I admit to some and I have to take an oath on the other. It wasn't a classic kelim and kelim case like 5 cars out of 10 I admitted to. No, it was that the whole claim in its entirety was about 10 cars and an acre of land. And I admitted that I owe you 5 cars. And then I required to take a shvuah on the other 5 cars. But since the whole claim includes land as well, even though we don't normally take an oath on land, because that's a basic law, we do not take oaths on land. In this case, we're going to take an oath on land. Okay, because it's called zokikin. Because since I already started, I needed to take an oath on the land. It's like the Gilgal Shvuah we saw at the beginning of yesterday's daf. We can basically require me to take an oath on something that normally I'm not required to take an oath, but since I'm anyway taking an oath on the cars, I'm basically obligated to take an oath on the land. To which the Gemara says, and this is where we left off yesterday, I don't understand. My kamashma on zokikin. You're trying to teach us this halacha of zokikin, and you're trying to say that this Mishnah in Shavuot. In other words, again, what did we do methodologically? We took a Mishnah in Shavuot. We didn't really understand what it was talking about because it seemed like it was talking about something incredibly obvious. So we tried to say maybe it's talking about heilach and teaching us something about heilach, that you need a Shavuot and heilach against Rav Sheshet. Then we said, no. It could be teaching us this halacha of zokikin. But if you want to explain that the Mishnah is teaching you zokikin, there's a different Mishnah that teaches you zokikin. Now, it happens not to be in Masechet Shavuot. It happens to be in Masechet Kiddushin. But there's this perspective that, if there's one Mishnah that's teaching you that, you don't need another Mishnah to teach you that, right? Maybe there's this assumption that we assume you know all the Mishnayot, so why should we bother repeating something? So Tanina says in a Mishnah, Zokikina nechasim she'ein lahem achrayut, which basically means movable property. Et hanechasim sheyesh lahem achrayut lishava alehem. This is exactly our halacha, which basically means if you have a claim on movables and non-movables, like property, that's nechasim that have achrayut, one can pull the other. The ones that are metaltalin, that are movable, that require an oath, can pull the others that don't really require an oath to require an oath, which is basically our case. In which case, we don't need two Mishnayot to teach us the exact same halacha. To which the Gemara answers, Hacha ikar hatam agar gvar anas, what you might have expected, which is, just because there's a Mishnah in Kiddushin, there we got to it because we were have that associative connection. We were talking about similar topics and we just mentioned it. But its real place is in Shavuot, where we're talking about which cases require you an oath, which cases don't. So it makes sense to mention it in Shavuot, even though maybe, yes, it's also mentioned in Kiddushin, but that's actually not really a difficulty. And with that, we answer the question on Rav Sheshet. We're now going to have a further question on Rav Sheshet. Then we'll have an attempt to prove Rabbi Chiya, and then we'll finish with the heilach sugya. And we'll move back to the first statement of Rabbi Chiya, which in case you don't remember, I'll remind you when we get there. Ulamanda amar heilach patur. Now, according to Rav Sheshet, who said, again, modeh b'miktzat, I admit to have a claim, but I say heilach. But here is the part I admit to, in which case I kind of divorce it from the rest of the claim, in which case, according to Rav Sheshet, I no longer take an oath on the other part that I denied. Well, amai itzrich krala miute karka mishvua. Why would I need a pasuk to teach me? There's a pasuk. We're not going to deal with it now, but it comes up later. It comes up in Shvuah. Rashi points out it comes up later in Parak HaZahav, later in our Masechet. There's a pasuk that proves that there's no oaths for land. Hakol karka helaku. You wouldn't need a pasuk to teach you that there's no oaths for land if all land is heilach. Now, why is all land heilach? This goes with what we learned in Masechet Bava Kama, that land is ein an exelet. What does that mean? Well, land, if I steal your land, it's always your land. It always has your name on it. It never changes ownership. It's not like money where I borrowed money and now I have money to return to you, but it's any money I can return to you. But karka is heilach. What does that mean? It means if I admit to part of the land, it's as if I said the land is yours and here it is, because the land is still yours. And as soon as I admit it also, of course, it's heilach. So you wouldn't need a special pasuk to say you don't take an oath. If there's no oaths for heilach, right, on a modeh b'miktzat heilach case, then there'd never be oaths in land in modeh b'miktzat either. You wouldn't need a special pasuk to teach you that. So amar lecha itzri. So we're going to basically prove now is we're going to come up with a case of land that wouldn't be heilach. The question presumes that any land case is heilach because I say, and here's your land, take it back. But we're going to come up with cases where land wouldn't actually be heilach. So what could that be? We'll have two answers. Itzrich kra, the pasuk is needed. If I say, you're right, you claim I stole an acre, I actually stole half an acre, and here it is. But I already dug pits, wells, all sorts of things, but the land is no longer there. Because what is the land? The land sort of the space, but it's also the land itself. And this place has no land because I dug holes in it. So there is no heilach because I'm not actually giving it back to you. I'm going to have to give you back the value of the land or something like that, or maybe give you the land but fix it. But it's not heilach as if here it is because I've ruined it. So that's one possibility. Inami, alternative option. Again, let's go back to the car and land case. You claim I owe you cars and land. And I admit to cars, but I don't admit to land. Now, that would be a case where you need a pasuk to tell you I'm not going to take an oath on the land, But why? Not because it's heilach, because the part that I gave back to you is actually the cars. There is no heilach. Again, it depends how the cars, but if I said in here they are, it would be heilach. But the point about there being a case where there could be land without heilach, that would be this case. Okay, Tashma. So that was a further question on Rav Sheshet. We weren't successful at knocking him out. Now we're back to Rabbi Chiya, and we're going to bring a proof for Rabbi Chiya. Now, background here. We've talked a bunch of times already, and we're going to see this much more in depth about the 4 shomrim. These are 4 people who are asked to watch an item. Each one has a different level of responsibility. For example, someone who watches it for free is exempt from theft or it gets lost, okay, since you're not getting paid to watch it and you can't use the item. So your level of responsibility is less, let's say, than someone who gets paid. So if it's stolen or gets lost, what do you have to do? Well, you can't just say it got stolen or lost because there's a concern that maybe you're just trying to take it for yourself. So you have to take an oath. And that's a basic law. And the way we usually understand that is, okay, so you claim, you gave me a cow. I say it was stolen. I come and I say it was stolen, and I have to take an oath in court that it was stolen, and then I can basically be exempt. If I don't take the oath, then I actually have to pay. But Rami Bar Hama has a whole different approach. And you might remember at the end of Bava Kama, if you learned Bava Kama with us, you might remember the pasuk about modeh b'miktzat. We also learned modeh b'miktzat there. Often the end of Masechto connect with the beginning of the next. Modeh b'miktzat comes up, it's learned from the words Asher Yomar ki huzeh. And it appears in a pasuk in Shemot chapter 22, verse 8. And the context there is actually pikadon. Okay, it's a case where you give me something to watch. And it says, I'll call it bar pesha on anything wrongdoing. I'll shor chamor, I'll sal sama, I'll call aveda, I'll share your mark. This is where we get, by the way, not land, because it lists all sorts of movable items, animals, clothing, okay, any kind of lost item. Ashil yomal kihuzeh. If you say kihuzeh, ad Elohim yavod varshnehem, you need to take an oath. Okay, well, we'll leave the end of that. So now there was a big debate there. Modeh b'miktzat, is that in a pikadon case or is it in a regular case? So somebody said, if you remember, eruv parshiot yeshkan. This pasuk of modeh b'miktzat is stuck in the middle of a pasuk where it doesn't really belong, and it really belongs with a loan. Really, modeh b'miktzat, the classic cases, you loan me money, I claim I pay back half, or you only loan me half, but not the other half, and then I take an oath on the second. But some people say, and Rami Bar Hama is going to be of those people, no. Modeh b'miktzat is in the shomrim pasuk because it's all connected. And now we're going to take it even further. What does it mean it's connected? And he's going to say something pretty radical. Ditani Rami Bar Hama, arba'a shomrim. No, we thought until now, and I want to make this very clear. When do I take an oath if I'm a shomer? If, let's just give the example of a shomer chinam, I'm watching your item for free, and I claim it was stolen. I have to take an oath about that. Comes Rami Bar Hama and says, because modeh b'miktzat is in the middle of that pasuk, he says that the 4 shomrim, in order to be obligated an oath, it's not as simple as we just said. That case that I said, you wouldn't actually need an oath, unless there was tfira b'miktzat v'hoda'ah b'miktzat. He's going to need, and it's a very crazy case, in order to take an oath for a shomer, you're going to need 3, let's just use animals, because that's the example they're going to bring up, 3 animals that we're contesting. You claim you gave me 3 animals. I say, I ruined them all, I killed them, I whatever you claim about them, and I'm obligated to pay you 3. 1, I deny. You didn't even give me 3, you only gave me 2. 1, I say you're right. I slaughtered the animal and ate it. And 1, I say it was stolen from me. And only in that case where we basically find a modeh b'miktzat. Now, modeh b'miktzat, usually there's 2 parts. This is going to have 3, because you're going to have to be modeh b'miktzat, which means you deny part, because what's the meaning of admitting to half if there's not the denial part? But then there's the part that I'm supposed to take the oath about, which is the part that I say it was stolen. So we're going to have to need 3 animals or 3 items that are in discussion here. Now, hechidami. Now, what is the case here? If not, now what's the point here? According to Rami Bar Hama, that's when I take an oath. Now, lav de amar le heilach. Now, is it not? Now, if I admit to one, when I'm basically, okay, maybe I gave a bad example. I should have said that I admit that one of them I still have, and it's yours, and I'm going to return it. One of them you never gave me, and one of them got stolen. So now, Picadon generally is, oh, and here it is, because the item's in my house. So lav damar heilach, and what do you see here? This is going to be a proof for Rabbi Chiya. In a heilach case, when I basically are returning one of them, right? I have to take an oath on the other. It's a heilach case, and I'm still obligated to take the oath. To which they say, lo, no. You don't have to necessarily assume it's a heilach case. And this is the way I said it in the first place, which is, you claim they all three died. And and I say, one of them, I don't know what you're talking about. You never ever gave me the para. That's the denial. Okay, here the Gemara gives an example of a shomer sachar, someone who gets paid. The only way they're going to be exempt is if some unexpected thing happened and they have to, again, take an oath about it. So one, I claim onus happened, and I'm going to take an oath about that one. And chada meta b'pshia, and one died. Now, once I say it died, it's no longer heilach case, right? To be ina shilum heilach, de lav heilach. And then basically I have to just pay you. It's not a heilach case, and it doesn't prove anything about heilach. So we tried to use this as a proof for Rabbi Chiya, but we're unsuccessful. Okay, now we're done with the heilach sugya. We're going to go back to the first Rabbi Chiya. So what was the first statement of Rabbi Chiya? The first statement of Rabbi Chiya had nothing to do with heilach, but remember, the second statement of Rabbi Chiya was about a modeh b'miktzah case. I admit to part of a claim, and there's a heilach, and I said, and here it is. The other statement of Rabbi Chiya was that not only is there a law of modeh b'miktzah, you have to take an oath, but even ejub b'miktzah, I have to take an oath. So if I deny the entire claim, but witnesses say, testify about half the claim, then I actually have to take an oath about the other half as well. That it's not just modeh b'miktzah, it's ejub b'miktzah. And now we're going to go back to that argument, that comment, and we're going to bring that teaching of Rabbi Chiya, and we're going to bring a contradiction to it. Tashma, let's learn from here. Detani avua de Rabbi Aptoriki, the father of Rabbi Aptoriki, said to Rabbi Chiya kamaita. Okay, it's a bit of an uncommon name. Aptoriki here obviously comes from the Greek. Anyway, he says to Rabbi Chiya kamaita. He says about Rabbi Chiya kamaita. And he says, here's a contradiction to your statement there. Mana li biyadcha, v'hala omer ein lecha biyadi klum. He's going to bring a case of ejub b'miktzah. You claim I owe you 100. I claim I owe you nothing. Va'edimi dimoto sheyesh biyado 50 zuz. And the witnesses testify that I have 50 zuz. Yachol isha ba'al ha'sha'al. Now you might have thought, which once we know this structure of a midrash halakha, it's going to say you might have thought, it's going to then say it's not true. You might have thought you need to take an oath on the rest, which would be Rabbi Chiya. Talmud lomar, but we learn from the pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Al kol aveda asher yomal ki hu zeh. From that pasuk, what do we learn? That's the pasuk for modeh b'miktzah. Those are the words that teach you. And what is it going to say? Al hoda'at piv atam chayvo. Well, what does it say? Asher yomar ki hu zeh. We're going to darshan in this language that this is it. Now, when it says that this is it, it's saying this, which is modeh b'miktzah, and then it is kind of saying, and just this case, you're going to have to take an oath, not anything else. You're not going to have to take an oath in an ejub b'miktzah case. So basically, what they've done right now is they brought this midrash halakha, which is the exact opposite of Rabbi Chiya, and throws it up as a question on Rabbi Chiya, to which the answer is obvious. Rabbi Chiya tanahu palik. How do the rules of Gemara work? The rules of Gemara work is that if I'm an Amora living in the time of the Gemara, I can't disagree with a Tana, with an earlier source from the time of the Tanaim, time the Mishna was written. I can't say something that goes against it unless I can bring some other Tanaitic source to support my reading and say, well, there was a debate in the time of the Tanaim and I hold by this one. Okay, or there's other ways of resolving it, but we can always throw a Tanaitic source and say, hey, this goes against you and you have to try to answer it. But if you're a Tana, you live in the time of the Mishna, you can say whatever you want. There could be a Tana disagreeing with you, but you could disagree with that Tana. That's all fine. That's all part of the rules of the game. So why are you raising a Tanaitic source as a contradiction to Rabbi Chiya when he himself is a Tana? So that's the Gemara's rejection of this question. But the Gemara says it's not that there's a Tanaitic source that's bothering us. It's ha-krak-amar. There's a pasuk. The pasuk clearly says it's in this case because it says ki hu zeh, which makes it very exclusive. Just in this case, are you going to have modeh b'miktzat yishava, but not edut b'miktzat? Not when there's edim that prove half your claim. So he says, ahu lemodeh miktzat hatana. So he says, no. What will Rabbi Chiya say? The pasuk is about modeh b'miktzat, and from there we'll infer also edut b'miktzat. What's the problem? I don't disagree that that's what the pasuk is talking about. I just think that you can learn from there to edut b'miktzat. Now, avodah Rabbi Apotriki, what would he say? Amar lecha, ktiv hu uktiv zeh. And this is what I said before, even though the Gemara didn't say it yet. But it says in the pasuk hu, this, and it says zeh, which is also a kind of word saying this. Well, why those two words? Chad, one of them is coming to teach you the basic law. Modeh b'miktzat hatana. Asher yomar ki hu zeh. You say, I admit to have. The chad, and the other word, which is a limiting word, comes to teach you that it's exclusively only modeh b'miktzat and not if witnesses come. That's what the counter argument will say. V'idach. So what's Rabbi Chiya going to say then? Again, we're back to square one, which is Rabbi Chiya. There's a pasuk which seems to go against what you're saying. It seems to say modeh b'miktzat and only modeh b'miktzat, only when someone confesses to part, not when witnesses come and say half. Well, what will he say? He agrees there's ki hu zeh, and each one is coming for something else. But there's two different things here. One is teaching you modeh b'miktzat. If you claim I owe you 100 and I say I only owe you 50, I have to take it out. The second is to say this will only be true in a case where we're talking the same item. Okay, like you say I owe you 100, I say I owe you 50. You say I owe you wheat, I say 10 pounds of wheat, and I say I only owe you 3 pounds of wheat. But if you claim I owe you wheat, and I say I agree I owe you something, but it's barley, it's not wheat, I won't have to take the oath. And that's what the second thing is referring to. The zeh is saying only if it's the same item that's being discussed. That's what it means. The modeh miminatana, you're admitting to the same type of item. If I admit to a different item entirely, and I don't admit at all to what you're claiming, that's a different claim. That doesn't work. V'idach. So what's the father of Rabbi Apotriki to say about that? Because he uses the zeh to exclude witnesses. Not what's he gonna deal with the miminatana? Where's he gonna get that from? Modeh miminatana lately. He doesn't hold by that halacha. And we can just say that, or we can prove it, that there is someone who holds this. Savar like Rabban Gamliel. He holds like Rabban Gamliel. Ditnan. Okay, here's a Mishna about this issue of hoda'a miminatana. Ta'ano chitin v'hodalo b'seorim patur v'Rabban Gamliel mechayev. Rabban Gamliel says, if you claim I owe you wheat, and I claim I don't owe you wheat, I owe you barley, that's still considered hoda'a miminatana. That's still considered, a modeh b'miktzat. I'll be obligated, and that's what the father of Rabbi Apotriki holds. And that's why he uses the zeh for something to exclude something else. Okay, so what we did so far, let's just go back and review this part of the daf before we move on. Question on Rav Sheshet, on the heilach sugya, an attempt to prove Rabbi Chiya. Both, we answered the question against Rav Sheshet and we rejected the proof against Rabbi Chiya. So zero-sum game, we ended up really nowhere with that. Then we went back to the first statement of Rabbi Chiya about edut b'miktzat obligating you an oath. What Rabbi Chiya said, we brought a contradiction to that from this Tana, but we really said in the end, it's really the problem is the pasuk. And then we explained how Rabbi Chiya would understand the pasuk to teach you something different. Now we're going to go to a story and use this also to raise an issue against Rabbi Chiya. Again, we're back to the first Rabbi Chiya. If witnesses testified apart, you have to take an oath. Now we're going to see a story where they didn't require an oath, and the question's going to be why. From here, we're going to get into some other things as well. Hahu raya, to have a masra they call Yoma Chevata Besade. There was a roetzon. Now, roetzon, we'll talk about this. In general, shepherds were not such trustworthy people. Okay, the main reason being they often took the animals to graze in other people's fields, so we're concerned that they're thieves. We're going to talk about this soon. Anyway, there was this guy who would watch other people's sheep, and people would give them their sheep every day. or whenever they did, and they would do it in front of witnesses because they didn't trust this person. Okay, the other reason, by the way, they didn't like Roetzon was because they weren't really knowledgeable people, and in the world of the rabbis, knowledge is everything. And these people, number one, weren't so knowledgeable. They weren't learning. They were out in the fields. And also they weren't connected with rabbis so much who they could ask questions to because they were always out far away from the town. So they weren't so knowledgeable. We'll talk about this a lot in Sanhedrin. So now he gives him animals. They would every day give them animals, and they would always make sure there were witnesses. However, as usually happens, Yom Echad masrule below Sadeh. One day somebody brought him animals, no witnesses. L'self amar lahu lo hayu dvarim me'olam. At the end of the day or the end of the week or month or whatever it is, the person comes back to get their animals. The shepherd says, I know what you're talking about. And obviously there's no witnesses, so what are we going to do? Well, even though there were no witnesses that saw him give the animals, somebody comes, two witnesses come and say, we saw this shepherd eat your animals. We recognize your animals, I guess. We saw the shepherd eat your animals, two of them. Okay, so maybe he claimed, we don't know how many he claimed. Let's say he claimed 10, and they at least testified apart. Okay, we have two witnesses testifying apart. This is a dupa miktsat. According to Rabbi Chiya, what should happen? The shepherd should have to take an oath that he doesn't, right? That there really are no others. I'm a Rabbi Zeira, but they didn't require the shepherd to take an oath. So Rabbi Zeira says, if Rabbi Chiya were right, he would have to take an oath on the others. Abaye says, how could you possibly make the shepherd take an oath? Wait, how could he possibly take an oath? These two witnesses came and said he ate two of the animals. That means he stole two animals that didn't belong to him and ate them. That means he's a thief. Now, a thief, okay, can't take an oath. Thief can't be a witness, can't take an oath. They're not trusted, right? If you steal, well, then you'll lie also. So how could we possibly even make him take an oath? So what are you even talking about, Rabbi Zeira? So Amarle shekenegdo kamina. Well, what I meant is, now this is something we learned also not so long ago in Bava Kama, but I'll review it in case you didn't learn it, which is normally when it comes to laws of oaths, usually the person who's holding the item, it's in their domain and doesn't want to pay it, or wants to claim it's their own, or I don't owe it to you. They take the oath and the money stays where it is. That's all based on this principle, always much harder to move money from place to place. So we're going to allow for an oath to let the money stay there. That's like a modeh b'miktzah, right? I admit I owe you 50, but I don't owe you the other 50. In order not to pay the other 50 and leave the money in my hands, I take an oath. That's usually, but in a case where one side is suspicious that they're a liar and we don't trust them because let's say they lied under oath once before in court, or they stole, or whatever it might be, we switch the oath. When there's a requirement for an oath, the rabbis came and said, you can't take an oath, but we're going to put your oath on the other side. And the person who wants to collect the money can take an oath and based on their oath can collect the money from you, which is a much harder thing to do. But when we have no choice, we flip it. So that's what so Rabbi Zeira says, I meant there's a requirement of an oath. Yes, of course, this shepherd can't take the oath. So we give it to the person who claims he gave the shepherd the sheep. That person will take the oath. So now they bring, okay, so that we resolved. And now he's basically trying to prove, look, why is there no oath? There should have been an oath according to Rabbi Chiya. Comes the Gemara and says, forget about an oath of Rabbi Chiya. Even if you don't hold by Rabbi Chiya, there should also be an oath here for a different reason, a different kind of oath. Hashanami delated to the Rabbi Chiya. Let's say, okay, maybe they didn't hold like Rabbi Chiya, and that's why there's no oath. But they should have instituted an oath based on Rav Nachman. Ditnan, as it says in a Mishna, and then we'll see what Rav Nachman says on this Mishna. You claim you loan me $100. I say, I know what you're talking about. I don't have any money of yours. But I'm a Rav Nachman. Okay, patur, I'm exempt. But comes Rav Nachman and says, it's not that simple. Otherwise, everyone can just go deny claims and be exempt, right? As long as you don't have witnesses, I can go off scot-free. Rav Nachman says, Mashbi'ino to shvuat hesed. The rabbis instituted what's called a shvuat hesed. What's a shvuat hesed? Hesed is like from the language of we place upon you. It's a shvuah the rabbis placed upon me. He said, we're worried that maybe I'm lying. So they instituted that kind of a shvuah. In which case, with this shepherd, they should have instituted that same kind of shvua, because it's the same kind of thing. The guy claims and they don't have any claim. Okay, maybe not edu b'miktzat shvua, but you should still need a shvuat hesed. To which the answer, oh no, there's no shvuat hesed here. Why? And pay close attention to Rav Nachman takantahi, v'takanta l'takanta lo avdina. Moving now to Amud Bet. What do we say? Rav Nachman's takana was a rabbinic, right? A rabbinic thing, meaning the rabbis instituted there's this type of shvuah needed. What else did we say was rabbinic? The fact that when you can't take the oath, the person who's supposed to, we switch the oath to the other person. Well, now we're going to have a takana and a takana. Because number one, we're going to say you need a shvuat hesed. But then we're going to say, oh, but you can't do it, so we're going to put it on the other person. That already is two removed. That's why there's no oath here of a shvuat hesed, because we're not going to do a takana on a takana. Okay, and that's why there's no shvuat hesed here. Okay, so basically we had the story. We have Rabbi Zeira say, look, seems Rabbi Chiya is not right because there should have been a shvuah and there wasn't. And then Abaye asked this question, but I don't understand how you could even require a shvuah. He's a thief. To which the Gemara questions Abaye's question and says, forget about him being a thief. Even if the agent hadn't testified against him, this guy still wouldn't have been able to take an oath because he's a roa. And we don't believe shepherds ever, like I said, shepherds are always considered thieves. But Amar Rabbi Yehuda, stam roa pasul. Rabbi Yehuda said, the stam shepherd, meaning if you don't even know anything about them, you don't know they've done bad things, we just assume they're bad, okay? Again, why? Because they're taking their animals to graze in other people's fields, so we don't trust them in general. So the answer, lo kashya, and here I'm going to go with one interpretation. There's different ways to understand this. Hadide hadal. We distinguish between shepherds who watch other people's sheep and shepherds who watch their own sheep. Shepherds who watch their own sheep are concerned because your own sheep you're going to take to graze in other people's fields. But if they don't belong to you, what do you care? What they, you're not going to take them to graze in other people's fields. And now we're going to prove why that there has to be some. Okay, we can't. They're going to say something very interesting. This is like creative halachic thinking. If you don't say that shepherds who take other people's sheep are trustworthy, how could we ever give our sheep to a shepherd? Why not? If I give my sheep to the shepherd and the shepherd, we're concerned, is going to take my sheep to graze in other people's fields and steal, this is basically putting a stumbling block in front of a blind person. If I know that someone's going to take my sheep to graze in other people's fields, I'm basically causing them to sin by giving them my sheep. So I wouldn't be able to do that because that's lifnei iver lo tiyeh mechshol, and then I'm guilty for giving them the sheep. So it must be that when it comes to other people's sheep, they don't take them to graze in other people's fields. Otherwise, I would never be able to give my sheep to someone to watch. Ella, now why is there an assumption that they won't take other people's sheep to graze and in other people's fields? Because there's an assumption that people only sin for their own sake. It's not worth sinning to help other people out. It's only worth sinning if you're going to actually gain personal benefit from it. This is all general, interesting things to think about. Anyway, we're going to move on from it. Again, there is a totally different way to understand this distinction, what hadidei hada alma is. I'm going with one interpretation. So again, quick summary, what we've gotten until this point. We dealt with Rabbi Chiya, the second statement of Rabbi Chiya, we're done with the heilach sugya. Now we went to the first statement of Rabbi Chiya. We're back to Eid Mitzvah requiring a shvuah. We tried to bring a contradiction from this drasha and the pasuk, and then we said it's really the pasuk is a problem. We resolved that. We brought this case that raised an issue. We resolved that as well because we said, right, the reason is he can't give a shvuah. And then, although we kind of still said it's possible, it proves that Rabbi Chiya is wrong. Then we said, well, why can't he give a shvuah? Is it because he's a roa? Is it because he's a gazlan? Okay, what the issue is. Then, now we're going to move back to the Mishna. And now we're going to deal with some language, which I particularly didn't get into yet, because I knew in the Gemara we get into it, which is in the Mishnah. Let's go back. We have two people fighting over tallit. Okay, so we're now done with that whole section. And now we're going to say each one has to take an oath. And what's the language of their oath? Okay, we'll read it right now inside. Each one has to say, okay, it's a very weird language. I do not have any less than half. Okay, now, what does that really mean? Okay, and the Gemara is going to really question this and says, Al di'ile mishtaba, oh, I'll delay lemishtaba. And this isn't a question, this is a difficulty. What they're going to say like this is, really means, right, I don't have any less than half, which really means, okay, let's just say it like this. It means I don't have a third of it. I don't have a quarter of it, right? Like I really own half of it. But when you say that, okay, right? So they're saying, does it mean I'll eat lay? What you're saying is I really have at least half as mine. On the other hand, I'll delay le mishtaba. You could be saying, okay, let's think about the wording. Again, it's very confusing wording. I don't have any less than half, which basically means I don't have a third, I don't have a quarter. It basically means I don't have 0.01 to 0.5, right? Anywhere on that range, I'm not in that range, okay? Which means either I have more than that, meaning I have at least half or not or more. But it also could mean I actually have zero. Because you're saying I don't have any less than half, which means I don't have anything from 0.01 to up to half of it, but it could actually mean, but I actually have nothing of it. So they're worried that this language could lead someone to lie under oath because they're not really lying. They're really telling the truth. The language leads to a double meaning. It could mean I have zero. It could mean I have at least half. So because of that, they're going to say, I'm a Rav Huna. Rav Huna is going to change this to saying, Da'amal shvu'at sheyesh li ba. He says, you have to add the words, I have a shvua, that I have some part of it, and the part that I have is no less than half. Okay? So I see what you're asking, Caroline. It's confusing, okay? I see you're asking why would it mean I don't have less than half could mean I have zero? Because what you're saying is the part that I have of it is no less than half, which means it could be though I don't have any part of it, because you're saying it in a language that's negative. I don't have less than half. I don't have a part of it that's less than half. That's what it really means. But it could be I don't have a part of it at all. Okay, so that's why you have to say, I have a part in it, and the part that I have in it is no less than half. And then you resolve. But they're still a little bit struggling with the language. Why don't you just simply say, right, Umi v'nema shvua shekula sheli. Your claim is, I own half. I'm sorry, I own the whole thing. So why is your shvua only about half? Why don't you say, the whole thing is mine? Well, Umi yahavina lekula. The reason you're not taking an oath on the whole thing is because in the end, we're not giving you the whole thing because you're only holding half of it. So you're not going to take an oath on something you're not going to get. We have to match the oath to what you're going to get. Okay. So why don't you just say very simply, half is mine instead of this very unclear language. If you take an oath, I own half, you're basically saying, I lied what I said before, because before I said I own the whole thing. Now you're saying I own half. So by saying I don't own any less than half, you're basically not contradicting your statement. Well, hashanami maralele dibure damar kulish. So you're also, if you say the whole thing is mine, and then when you come to take the oath, you say I'm only taking an oath about half, then you are actually you're ruining your previous statement. You're saying something worse than what you said. So they say what you really mean to be saying is, and with this we'll finish this section, da amar kula shali. Okay, you're really saying the whole thing is mine. I think the whole thing is mine. Uli divrechem, but you claim half of it is owned by someone else. So shvua sheyesh li ba ve'en li ba pachot michetzia. So I will take an oath that I do have a part in this and at least half. Okay, so you're basically saying, according to you, I still hold by my whole thing, but I'm not going to take an oath about it because you're not asking me to take an oath about that. Now they're going to say, okay, so let's go back to the basics here. If each one is holding half, I really don't understand why you need an oath. And this is going to bring us back to what we already know, which is, we already quoted this before. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, shvuazo takanat chachamim shelo kol echad ve'echad holech v'tokeh b'talito shel chavero ve'omer shelihu. They say what's obviously going on here is you really don't need this oath, but the rabbis institute this oath so that people just don't go grab. They see me pick something up, and then they say, oh, if I just grab it, even though it's been a minute, you already got it, I'll at least be able to get half. So to prevent that from happening, we institute the oath. And what will the oath do? Well, you're not going to lie under oath. So now the Gemara asks an excellent question. If the whole, and a very interesting question, the whole purpose of the oath is to prevent you from lying, to prevent you from stealing, basically. Well, the Gemara asks, if we think that you're trying to take away this tallit from me, and you're a thief, basically, Okay, if I pick this up and it's mine, and you now want to grab it, and that's the whole purpose of the oath, to prevent someone who grabbed it, right? And now you'll come and you're only going to take an oath, we assume, if you really legitimately, it's yours, okay? And you really grabbed it at the same time as me. But I don't understand. If you're willing to grab something that's not yours and steal, what would prevent you from lying under oath? Okay, that's what this line means. If you're chashid, if we're suspect that you would steal because you're grabbing this tallit that's not yours, shouldn't you be chashid hashvuata? We talked about it earlier today, that some people, we don't let them take oaths because we think they might lie under oath. To which the Gemara answers very simply, we don't say that. Stealing, okay, now if you talk about the level of mitzvot and how severe things are, stealing is kind of in the middle, oaths is up at the top of the list. In other words, people don't like to swear falsely. We talked about this before. Somebody might steal, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to lie falsely under oath. That's a different story. So therefore, no. Okay, well, it's very nice to say something like that, but they have to support it. So now they're going to try to come up with several attempts to support it. So we'll see. We'll probably just get to 2 today. If you don't say that, then how could the Torah institute back to our modeh b'mitzat shvua? Nema, what's the problem with modeh b'mitzat? We're worried. I claim I only owe you 50. We're worried I'm lying about the other 50. So we make me take an oath so that we make sure I'm not lying. So if we're concerned that I'm lying about the other 50, then how does it help to make me take an oath unless we say, just because I'm worried that I'm stealing 50 doesn't mean I'm going to lie under oath, right? And that would prove it. So again, how could you institute an oath if we say, if we're concerned you're going to steal, we don't let you take an oath, then there would never be a modeh b'mitzat oath. To which the Gemara says that's not true, because we're not really worried I'm stealing. With the tallit case, we're really worried that maybe you're stealing my tallit. It's very possible. But in the modeh b'mitzat, we already learned this, Kid Rabba, as Rabba said. We just think you're just trying to push off paying the loan. You really intend to pay the loan ultimately. Remember, that was the whole thing. I don't really have the chutzpah, the audacity to lie in your face. So I'm not going to lie and deny the whole claim. I'm going to deny only part. Why am I denying only? Why did I say part? I said part because I will pay that back. The other part, I was just trying to push you off till I get the money. So that's why. That's not a real lie. What we're going to have to prove in these cases to say they're not proofs is that you're not really chashud about stealing. You're just trying to push off the inevitable, right? You're trying to push off the creditor, trying to the creditor. You don't want to give him the money. You're just pushing him off. That's not really stealing, okay? Because again, you're just trying to buy time. Teda, and here's even proof. If you deny a loan, you're actually believed when it comes to being you're believed, even if you deny a loan. Okay, just because you denied a loan and then there's proof that you denied the loan, you're not considered a thief. You'll still be accepted as a witness. But if I have an item of yours in my house, that's stealing, because that's basically taking it as my own. That's not the same. Pasulei do, because we assume you lie about a loan, it's just because you don't have the money in hand to return. Okay, second attempt to prove, and this is going to be a review of something we saw earlier in the daf. Elahadatani Rami bar Hama. What Rami bar Hama said about the 4 shomrim. What are these, right? Remember, they need to deny a claim and also admit to a claim, and then also say, and the third one, if something happened, then I'm exempt. Nema, why don't we say, what's the whole concern here? Why do we make you take the oath? Because we're concerned that maybe you're lying. So if we're concerned that maybe you're lying, you're trying to steal the item yourself. And what do we say? Pikadon is stealing. By trying to take it for yourself, that's what we're making you take an oath. So the fact that we allow you to take an oath must mean, even if you're suspect of lying, we allow you to take the oath. We trust you for that. So which they say, no. Sever Nami, this doesn't prove anything. Same thing as before. You're really just trying to push off returning it. Savar, why would you be pushing off returning it? Isn't it in your house? Well, maybe not. Savar mishkachna leganav v'tafisna. Let's say you're a shomer sachar, which means if the animal was stolen from you, you're liable to pay. So maybe you're hoping, maybe I'll find the thief. I'll just push you off until I find the thief and get the item back. Maybe the animal went out to the marsh and isn't home right now. And maybe you're just pushing them off. So just because you deny a claim or you're worried you're lying doesn't mean that you're actually a thief, even in a pikadon case. So they say, wait a minute. This doesn't jive with what we just said. Didn't we just say if you deny a pikadon case, then you are not believed to testify? So why don't we just say there? Maybe you're just pushing off a claim. So they write, right? Maybe you're just waiting to find the animal. So they say, okay, well, we're going to distinguish between these two things we just brought. When we say, when we say, if you deny a pikadon case, you cannot testify in court. That's when the witnesses come and say, we see it in your house right now. And then you can't say, maybe you were just pushing them off because the animal wasn't there. It got stolen and you're looking for it or something like that. Or or we see it in your hands. And you just say it's kofer pikadon means it's mine, you say, and it's not true, it's not yours. Okay, so basically, what we did so far, we're going to stop here for today. This last section was a discussion about why, if we think you're stealing, do we allow you to take an oath? And the answer is, because just because we think you're stealing doesn't mean we assume that you're also going to lie under oath. And what we basically did was try to prove it from these other two cases, where we allow you to take an oath even though we think you're lying. But then we said, no, neither of these prove anything, because there's lying and there's lying, right? The two cases we brought, we just think you're pushing off. We don't really suspect that you're trying to steal. If you were really trying to steal, maybe really you wouldn't be able to take an oath, and therefore we haven't proven our point yet. Okay, so we're going to try to continue to find proofs how we know that even when you're suspect for stealing, we're still not going to suspect you for lying under oath. Okay, so that was the last section that we did. Again, the quick review. We finished Rabbi Chiya, the first one, and Rav Sheshet, his argument about the heilach case with modeh Metzia. We moved back to the age of Metzia and the Rabbi Chiya opinion there. Tried to bring questions against Rabbi Chiya. Then we went back to the language of the Mishna. Why specifically was it worded in that way? The Yishabasha ein lo b'pachot michetzia. What's the purpose of the oath? Once we got to the purpose of the oath, we basically brought up this big question of, if we're really worried you're stealing, how can we possibly believe you for an oath? And we're still in that question. Wishing everybody a good day and besorot tova.